Hey there, beautiful people. This is Gina Robinson, and you are listening to the Renew Podcast. You are in the right place and always welcome here. Hey, ladies, welcome back to the Renew Podcast. We are here today. Pastor Lauren is with me again. Not just my sidekick, but my friend, my pastor, and we have some friends with us today. Daimon and Sarah Elliot. I don't want to waste a lot of time because we need all the time to talk about all the things.
Got to get into it.
Exactly. They do have a marriage podcast called the Spicy Marriage Podcast. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But I want Pastor Lauren to introduce her friends and just share a little bit about them before we get into their story and kind of where you guys landed. So if this is going to be fun, stay tuned.
Yeah, buckle up.
Buckle up.
Oh, gosh. So I honestly don't even know where to begin. I've known Daimon since I was like in elementary, middle school. He grew up in Greenville. I grew up in Greenville. Go Vikings.
That's right.
So I've known him for 70 years. Sarah, I actually met, we connected in, was it 2002?
I think it was 2001.
2001, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we were freshmen, finishing up freshman year,
college. Yep. So I'm going to try to keep it kind of concise. There's so much more to the story.
For sure.
At the time, I was dating Aaron, and we were trying to, Open Door was really, really small. So it was like 50-ish people. And we were kind of one of the only young adults. We either had people who were much older or much younger. So we were trying to walk things out correctly, praying for good friendships. And we had been praying. And shortly thereafter, I got an email from a different church saying like, hey, we've got, I'm laughing when I say this. Hey, we've got a young adult retreat coming up, and Daimon Elliot's leading it. And I was like, wait, Daimon Elliot? Wait.
The same Daimon Elliot?
Same Daimon Elliot in high school? Okay.
Boy, it was wild, Del.
But anyway, so I told Aaron, I was like, hey, this might be a great place to meet people and like connect with other people our age. And so he went along with it. And then that's when we met Sarah, reconnected with Daimon. And it was kind of one of those moments where at the time, you don't, looking back, I don't think in the moment I realized like, oh my gosh, these are going to be like lifelong and forever friends.
Yeah.
But we just all kind of hit it. I mean, we just connected and we stayed friends for however many 20 years that was.
Yeah.
And so it really, they have been, I can't even express it or articulate just how much they mean to us. And now to have them in such a vital part of Open Door. I was going to say Aaron's an elder. He is an elder. Daimon's an elder now. And gosh, Sarah does so many things here at Open Door Church. And she even worked in our preschool for a time period. And so there's just so much history there, but they're just our best friends and we love them and can't imagine life without them.
Yeah, amen.
Super, super special. Fun fact, as I clear my throat, Sarah and Daimon, I met when they were in college, but I knew Daimon prior because we were at a previous church together for many years, and Sarah too. And the fun fact is that Jimmy and I really had a passion and compassion, if you will, for young adults. And I remember when we started at Open Door, Aaron came knocking on our door and saying, hey, would you guys be willing to help? And so looking now at the blessing, the gifts, the redemption, and the fun of all that God has done, it blesses me. And you guys are such a gift to the body, and you're a gift to this church and to this community. And I'm not going to cry. So let's go. All right. So Daimon and Sarah have got a story. They're going to just share a little bit about themselves, kind of where they landed. Their podcast is amazing, and they'll share a little bit about that too. But you guys go ahead.
Awesome. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank y'all.
And David is our first male.
First male on the podcast. I didn't learn that until today. Thank you, ladies, for giving me the opportunity to share.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
So,
Room full of females.
so we met at a previous church that we were at, and I was leading in college ministry because God radically changed my life April 11th of 2000. So alluding to Lauren's surprise. And that's right. That's right. There's no way this guy. And so anyway, as soon as Jesus got a hold of my heart, I started leading a college ministry at a previous church. And so I did that with an old friend. And so Sarah came walking in one night with a girl that I went to fourth grade with. And I had not seen this girl since fourth grade. So we went to school, or we were in the same grade in fourth grade. She moved away to the western part of the state and came back to ECU. And she saw me at church, and we got to talking, and I said, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in forever. And she's like, I know, it's, been I guess I was, 10 or 12 years at that point. And so she said, I would love to come to the college ministry, and she happened to bring Sarah, but the story of how she met Sarah is probably an even cooler one, and I'll let her weigh in on that.
So I am not originally from Greenville. I lived about 2 hours away. So when I came to ECU, I knew no one. And I cried every night, called my mom, wanted to go home, just hated it because I just felt very alone, fish out of water. And so I happened to have this 8 a.m., sports physiology, whatever that exercise class is that all freshmen have to have it.
We all hated.
It's terrible.
So I was standing at this bus stop and getting ready to catch the bus to go to this class, and just kind of struck up a conversation with this girl. And she was like, yeah, I'm actually, one of my friends is leading this college ministry, and I really want to go. And so she and I started hanging out. She invited me to this college ministry, and that's when I met Daimon, and I would have never probably met him if I hadn't been at that bus stop.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
it was
speaking to her.
It was a total God moment, intervention type deal. And I knew the first time that I laid eyes on Sarah that I wanted to marry her. I kid you not. We shook hands, and electricity happened.
Oh.
And so,
I
but
didn't know that.
it's true.
Well,
She did not. She was dating somebody.
I didn't know it at the moment either.
Sarah was already sinning.
That's right.
She was dating someone.
That's right. That's right.
No, but I remember the moment that I met him, and it wasn't like a romantic thing for them. It was just a significant encounter when I met him, and we were friends for 8 months. Mm-hmm. We were very good friends. Nothing more than that for 8 months. And
I had gone on dates with other women or girls at that time, and it just never felt, they were great women. There was nothing wrong with them, but anytime we would go out, I never felt the connection of this is it.
Yeah.
And so, but Sarah and I had a real strong friendship, and I always wanted more, but I never pushed the issue. The Lord worked out the whole situation with her, the guy she was dating at the time. He worked all that out. And funny story, I kid you not, and I'm going to tell this because this is very important. She came back.
She's like, oh, Lord.
I'm nervous.
She came back from Christmas break.
oh yeah,
And her friends put her up to making me think that she got engaged.
yeah.
So
That is evil.
Oh, it's evil. It's terrible.
I know. They knew.
I don't even know this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
They knew he had a little crush on me, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you should tell him that you got engaged over Christmas break." And I was like, "I cannot do that to this boy. I can't do that." And so anyway,
So I knock on the door, and she comes to the door, and she holds up her finger. She says, I got engaged. And I'm like, my heart literally sank.
Oh.
Yeah, I was trying my best at that moment to not lose it. And because at that moment, my whole world stopped. It's the craziest thing. And then 5 seconds later, she was like, I'm just kidding. I was like, oh my gosh.
it was literally 5 seconds later. I was like, I'm really
hope.
kidding. They made me do this.
They put me up to it.
Yeah, true. So anyway, soon after that, we started dating after that, and we were really close friends. And she was like, I'm really concerned that if we start dating, we're such good friends. And I basically sat her down and I said, look, we can either be friends and you'll meet somebody and I'll meet somebody and we will go on our separate ways and we won't be friends in 2-3 years. That's just the reality of it. Or we can give this thing a shot, see how it goes. And if it turns out great, it could be the best thing that we've ever done. And 20 years later, it's the best thing we've ever done.
Guys, it is their anniversary.
It is their anniversary today.
So congratulations, y'all. I love that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story of how we got together. And it's really, I knew from the moment that we started dating, there was no question in my mind that I wanted to marry her. And so anyway, we dated for a year. We were engaged for 2 years. God, it was ridiculous. Don't advise that.
Oh my
Never do that.
gosh. I know. I feel like that's what my son just did. I was like, don't recommend that long of an engagement.
So,
But that is a very long time. You guys, in your roles, obviously, you're on the worship team, and there's Sarah, you're at the info center, and there's lots of things and dynamics within. You have 2 wonderful children. One's getting ready to turn 16 and drive. I am praying for all of you right now. It is a fun and exciting time, and also you feel a little free because someone else can drive. But what I wanted to ask you guys about is one of your roles has been doing marriage coaching, and that has been so impactful here. Gosh, I don't even know how many people that you've counseled as far as young couples and older couples. But in that role, what got you guys there? And then this Spicy Marriage podcast. So kind of like, what did you go like, yeah, let's just start coaching couples. Like, how did this happen?
Well, I think I'll kick it off and say that I think it started way before, like, the last couple of few years that we've been doing this. And it started, you and Jimmy were a huge part of that. Clark and Lisa, like when Aaron and Lauren and us were kind of coming up and like figuring out like this relationship thing, and like then onto engagement and then marriage. Like, we had couples who had gone before us who really were able to speak into our lives and kind of set the example for, that's the kind of marriage we want to have. Like, oh my gosh, they've got kids, like they have jobs and houses and like cars. Like, we want to do those things. And so just really seeing the way that you and Jimmy did life and like other friends did life was just a huge example for us. And you guys took the time to really speak into us very early on. So as our relationship and then our marriage progressed, the Lord just opened up opportunities for us to be able to, gain wisdom from other married people as well, but then also to kind of start encouraging other marrieds or young marrieds in that journey too. So that's kind of
totally agree. The things that you and Jimmy and Clark and Lisa poured into the 4 of us when we were just starting out were so impactful in our beginning years. Like, it meant, and we have said that from the outset, because it was such a refreshing thing, because you get to a place in your life where your parents can only advise you and counsel you so much.
True.
And then you have other people that step in and begin to take on roles of advisors and mentors. And it's a powerful thing. I mean, it's a biblical thing. And so the investment that y'all made in the 4 of us, I think, has really been a foundational piece of both of our marriages.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that at length with Aaron and Lauren just as friends and looking back over all these years. And it's like, man, it's been a great, great ride. Yeah. But we're so grateful that we had y'all in our lives to just show us what it was like to do life. And even in the hard seasons, raising kids is freaking hard, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, that's hard.
Yeah.
And y'all were in the throes of it at the time.
Yes.
I thought about that this morning.
I mean,
I was like, they invited us over to their house.
Exactly.
And we would just be hanging out.
I was thinking, I was like, how old were my kids? I was like,
They were small boys.
Hey, that Ethan cake was good though.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. You know what that's really called? Better than sex.
Better than ain't nothing better than sex, right?
Later. Yeah. Love it. Oh gosh, fun times. But yeah, that was definitely a season where Jimmy and I were in the thick of it, and navigating family dynamics, extended family, and all that. But you guys are. It's just, I believe, the central. Well, we know that this, but marriage is Christ centered, and His desire for all of us, whether you guys, if you're listening, if you're engaged, you're dating, or you're married, is for that to be that's a picture of the church. And when you think about the reflection of that, you want to make it better, and you want to work on it. And transitions, when you go through transitions in life, and you guys have been through transitions in the past 20 years, things bubble up to the surface. And I think the easiest thing sometimes is to go, well, we're solid, so that can wait. And that is true. You're solid because of Jesus. Yep. But there's things that need to be taken care of. And so that kind of leads me to, like, when you're doing your coaching and meeting with couples, or maybe people that are dating. I know you've met with people that are just dating and not engaged. What's some running themes that come up in these conversations that you guys can, like, give us some wisdom today? Because look, we could do like a series on this, really.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
But I think that you guys probably have had some reoccurring questions or themes that have gone on that couples deal with, and so I just wanted you guys to share a little bit on that too.
One of them is really, and it's kind of led us to our podcast, was sexual disconnection. And that's been one of the recurring themes. And so that it takes work, and it takes a lot of intentionality to have a great sex life. It's not something that just happens, because just like you mentioned before, you get into the throes of life of raising children, and it's tough. And the kids are running around, and you've got to do breakfast, you've got to do lunches, you've got to put them down for naps, you've got bedtime, you've got baths, all these things that just the throes of life are shoved onto you. And it's an easy thing for your marriage and your sex life to take a back seat because of the responsibilities that you have. And so we quickly found out when we were in Colorado that we were running a business, we had 2 small kids, and it was just, we were just going through it.
Yeah.
And so we had another couple in Colorado that really spoke some life into us as far as just our sex life, and giving us some freedoms that we had never really considered before. And it was life-changing. Yeah. It was altering to our sex life and our marriage, because if you are healthy and capable, your sex life is a number one indicator of whether or not your marriage will survive.
Yeah.
I mean, you show me a sexless marriage, and I'll show you a marriage that is on the road to the big D. And I hate to say that, but it is an unfortunate fact. And it's so easy for us to just shut that part of ourselves down because of the responsibilities of life, and not lean into it, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think the sexual dysfunction, yes, that's huge, but also the just communication in general. A lot of couples, whether they're newly married or if they've been married 20 plus years, a lot of times they don't know how to communicate. So when you mesh your 2 worlds together, we all have our own styles of how we deal with conflict and grief and, maybe just frustration. So dealing with that, but then learning how to add another variable in that, which is your spouse and their emotions and their stress level and the way that they tend to process things. So I think a lot of times people just don't know how to even communicate just about general day-to-day things, much less how they're feeling about sex, or how they feel about how is our sexual relationship within this marriage. I don't know how to talk about that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of couples don't even know where to start. And so for us, we just really kind of tried to invest in our own marriage and have very honest, transparent, very uncomfortable conversations with each other about, what do you like? What do you don't like? Are you happy? Are you satisfied? What do you want to try? Like all of those things that, makes, I'm sure some people listening to this are like cringing but at the moment, but it's the only man.
This is G-rated right now.
This is very G-rated.
But we had to learn how to communicate to one another. And part of that was just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. And we've had some very hard conversations with each other, but it has helped us along the way to become more comfortable. And like, we can talk about something now and it's just like, that's how we talk. And that's what we talk about. But with couples, I think communication, and then that definitely plays into sexual dysfunction, because if you have the dysfunction and you don't know how to talk about it, you're kind of at an impasse of, well, what do we do? Like, the Lord doesn't want you to stay there. He wants your sex life to thrive. Like, he created it. He wants it to be great. And so being intentional and trying to understand how to make it great and fulfill the other person's needs and meet them where they're at is so critical within that, I think.
Yeah, and Jesus even said in John 10, he said, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And so why would we not translate his words, his truth into our marriage, and not just into our marriage, but every aspect of our marriage, whether it's our communication, whether it's our sex life, whether it's raising families. It doesn't matter how much money you make. How much money you have in the bank has no bearing on the connectedness of your marriage. Yeah. And without having true vulnerability, it's impossible to be intimate, truly intimate. And true intimacy and vulnerability means that I can share my entire self with Sarah, and she can share her entire self with me, the good, the bad, the ugly, the deepest, dark parts of me that I don't even like about myself.
Yeah.
But when I'm able to say that to her, or express those things to her, or express doubts, or express fears, if I'm able to share that part of myself with her, it gives her a glimpse into who I really am. And oftentimes in marriages where there's dysfunction or where there's a disconnection, you've got individuals that are still trying to be themselves or put on a show for their spouse, as opposed to just being who you are. Because she didn't marry me. She did marry me because I was handsome at one time, and I did have hair.
And a stash.
And a stash. That's right.
Do not forget that.
I had some sideburns.
I had some sideburns. I had all of it. I was trying to
cartilage pierced.
That's right. I was trying to compensate for my hair departing me. It's what it is. Or migrating, I should say. So, but she didn't marry me just for all of those parts. Like, when we say I do, we say I do to the entire person.
Yeah.
And that entire person still has to be redeemed and worked on every single day. The Holy Spirit still has to work in my life every day. And that's a process. That's not something that occurs miraculously overnight sometimes. He's still trying to dig things out of me. And if I can't be honest about the things that he's trying to dig out of me, or if I can't be honest about where I really am at, then I can't move into that place of healing. And particularly for men oftentimes don't share because they feel like that they have to be the strong one. Yeah. I got to put on a strong front, right? I got to get through this. Like, we want to provide for our families. We want our families to be safe and secure and all this. And I can't be vulnerable. I can't be emotional. I can't be any of these things because then it makes me look weak.
Right.
But that's the biggest lie of the enemy. Yeah. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane sweat blood. He was in such distress. Lord, if you can take this cup from me, that was incredibly honest.
Yeah.
I mean, very honest for the Messiah, the Son of God, to say, if you can let this cup pass from me, please do.
Please do.
And so if Jesus did that, why can't we stand before our spouse that God gave us as a helpmate and say, this is where I'm at? And then for our spouse not to use that as a weapon, not to use that as a way for me to put my thumb on you, but use that in a way that says, I see you. I see where you are. And there were times where either I was going through some difficult times or Sarah was going through some difficult times, and we would just lay in bed at night, and I would look over at her, and I would look at her deep in the eyes, and I would say, I see you. And like, that's a powerful thing. And she would do the same thing with me if I was having going through a tough spell at work or, tough decisions to make. And she would just take my hand and say, I see you.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing, because it lets me know that she's in it with me, that she's not just a separate entity from me, that the two truly have become one flesh. And in spite of all the shortcomings, she's still there. So without that vulnerability, you can never enter into all that God has for us, because it's just like sin. Until we confess our sin, like the Lord, when we confess our sin one to another, He's righteous and just to forgive us. But it's not until we really are honest about it. That's the vulnerability piece that the Holy Spirit's trying to get at. And in marriage, I think that's the one thing that's lacking so much, and where there's been such disconnect, is the true vulnerability to happen.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. Because, when you think about, I was thinking about just shame and how the enemy uses that to keep us from our communication, because there's just things that you're not proud of, or things that you're like, like you said, you don't like about yourself. And it takes you back to Adam and Eve. They covered themselves because they were ashamed. And it's almost like the marriage is meant to uncover all those things, because it's a picture of the church and Christ Himself. And so, when you're talking, I'm thinking like to stand before your spouse bare, naked, and vulnerable in all seasons, in all things, and to know that I'm not leaving you.
Right.
Like I'm staying. And I think I've talked about this even with Jimmy, and I know Lauren knows that this is a trigger in my own life, but just the abandonment and rejection piece, I didn't realize that I dealt with that as a child, because my parents stayed together. There was a lot of dysfunction, but that piece, I always was afraid somebody was going to leave. And so that has translated into friendships, relationships, my marriage. So if your way of conflict is to walk out and leave so that you can get yourself together, well, you've already lost me. Even though they are trying to protect and do, because they don't want to say something that they don't want to say. And so you talked about like conflict and resolution, and people deal with conflict and resolution so differently.
for sure.
Well, first of all, it was modeled for us growing up. And then we have to figure out, okay, what's true, what's false, what's broken. And there's no perfect family that none of us grew up in. I'm thankful that my parents stayed together and worked through things and saw God redeem, but there's a lot of trauma and pain that bled over into my marriage. And things that I do when I deal with conflict. I'll never walk out of anything, but I will fight you. I will stay in it, and loyalty might be one of my strengths, but it's also because like I'm not leaving. I'm not gonna, I'm in it till the end. And sometimes that's good, but there are things that God wants us to release and let go and let Him touch. And I'm not good at that. So, I've got a million other questions, but I want Lauren to ask something because she knows all the things about y'all. And so there's probably something she's like, the listeners really need to hear this.
Well, it's interesting you say that. And I feel like, well, one, I want to brag on them, because even as we were talking and I joked about the Heath Bar cake on the way over here, I was processing this morning just about kind of how, because I knew some of the questions you were going to ask, kind of how they got here. And I just think it's really cool, even as we were just briefly talking about the impact that you and Jimmy and Clark and Lisa and others have had. I think what people don't know about them, and I want to brag on them about, is that yes, y'all modeled that for us, but they have been so faithful and given so much time. I can't even, it's hard for me to even quantify how much time that they have given to other couples. And they've been so faithful to lead small groups, to invest in other couples purely because, they love the Lord, they love each other, but they have such a passion for not mediocre marriage.
Yeah.
Because they've seen the benefit of it. But what would be so easy is to experience all of that and to get healing and to have freedom in your own marriage, but not share it and not deposit it. And it really is a ministry. And I know, like, we can, joke about the Spicy Marriage podcast and we have fun with it and what they share, but what they share is invaluable. And I think, knowing them for so long and having all these conversations with them, I kind of feel like I'm like an advantage because we've had all the behind the veil conversations with them. So like, I don't know what question I would ask because they talk about it all the time. But I think what is so awesome about them, and even Damon said it earlier, is about the vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's hard. And it's hard to have it with your spouse, but it's also hard to share the things that they share with the world.
Yeah.
And especially in their season of life, because they do have children. And so I'm just super proud of them. And I don't know, I look back at like what we experienced 20 some years ago and to see all of what God's doing in them now. And it's not just what he's doing in them, it's what he's doing through them. And just when I think of marriage, it's not because they're perfect people, but there aren't really many other couples that Aaron and I can say they are truly each other's cheerleaders and they love each other so much, and the good, the bad, the ups, the downs, moving to Colorado, abandoning us.
Lord's still working on that. That's right. Trigger for hearing. I know. That's right.
But all of that aside, I don't know. They have given, I probably don't have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I probably should have given some more thought to that because they are so real with us.
Yeah.
And they share with us all the time and vice versa. And I'm just having a friendship and people that are willing to do that, that's just priceless.
Well, is that kind of like, kind of just going to the vulnerability, is that what kind of led you guys to go, hey, let's try this podcast thing? Because there's a million marriage podcasts out there. And first of all, I want to commend you because many people would be like, well, why do we want to do that? There's already a million others.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about that before we kind of end today, because I think, yes, it's a fun podcast, but you actually talk about topics that people don't want to talk about. And I've heard many people go, oh my gosh, like they're Christians and they are talking about this. I'm like, sex is biblical and having fun is biblical. Like, but anyway.
We own that abundant life, y'all. Here it comes. You don't open the door, Gina. You about to go from G-rated to R-rated. Just kidding.
But I really do want to talk about that because I'm sure like people that get ideas and they're like, oh, we're not going to do that. But I commend you guys for like just doing it and not trying like to go, okay, we're going to. You don't have to have goals to actually start something. You do have to have goals to finish.
Right.
But to really like let God birth something is like you just have to use faith and go, okay, he's given us this passion, compassion, and giving you some wisdom of life. So will you guys talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So we always talk to Aaron and Lauren about things.
We'll leave it at that.
That's right. We'll leave it at that.
Like they have always kind of jokingly have said, y'all should do a podcast at some point. And we have some other friends that we've talked about, and they've kind of said the same thing. And we're like, oh, like I'm like, I don't know how to start a podcast. Like, what? I don't know how to do this. But the more we talked about it, and we were like, wow, like this could actually be a really great opportunity for us to like help other people, because we can't like. It's just the season of life we're in. It's very hard to do a consistent small group,
Right.
so we do meet with couples one-on-one, and we love that. But we also were just like, well, why don't we just try it and just like see how it goes? And so I figured out how to do like the podcasting thing. Daimon is not involved with that process. So I'm kind of the producer. But it is really like a hobby. It is not, we both have our careers. Like, so the podcast, although we love it, like we absolutely have a passion for it, it is more of a hobby for us. And, you know, we don't do it as often as we'd like, but we try to hit on some topics that we feel that couples have either mentioned as like they're too embarrassed to ask about this. They don't even know how to start. They don't even want to say some of the words that I won't say on this podcast. But
We don't need an E beside this podcast. Explicit. So we'll keep it light.
yeah, but like they might just be too bashful or embarrassed or even ashamed to even ask the questions or have the conversation. So we just decided, we're like, you know what? We feel like the Lord's just saying, just do it, you know? And so we started it
Well,
March.
first she released it on Instagram, and I was like, "Oh, we're doing that." We had talked about it.
We had talked
We had
about
been, no,
it.
don't misunderstand me. We had talked about it, but I was like, okay, all right, we're going, we're doing it.
Yeah, so I just kind of like went with it because
She kicked
I'm
us off
more
the
of the
ledge.
executor. Damon will just process it for a long, long time. So I'm like, let's just do it. So we did
I
it.
feel it. I feel that.
So we started the podcast, and you know, we've recorded some spicy episodes.
Yes, they're so good.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited, and it's really cool. Like we don't care about, you know, metrics or anything like that, but it is very cool to see, oh my gosh, like all of these people have listened. I wonder what's happening in all of these people's marriages. Like I hope that we are helping enrich their marriages and ultimately turning them closer to Jesus, because that's you know, one of our goals too. But anyway,
Yeah,
I'll let you
and
share
we
more.
really, when we sit down with couples, and particularly when we do premarital counseling and we're talking to them about sex, you can just see some of them just clam up.
Yep.
Oh my! That's
I mean, they just will literally,
the
like,
body
you can
language.
tell that
You're
it's like there's so much clenching going on at that moment in time. And it really, when people spoke into us and gave us permission to have a great sex life, and I think the church has done a really poor job of setting up married couples to have great sex.
Yeah.
Because you grow up in the purity culture and all of these things, and all of that's good, but we've attached shame to the one thing that God said there is no shame in.
Yes. Yes.
And so all of a sudden we go from don't touch, don't taste, don't do any of these things, and now you get married and it's like, oh great, go have a good time, and you're like,
What do you do?
Exactly. They're like,
and either their parents or their churches or their peers, and we'll sit down and say, where does your idea of sex come from?
Yeah.
Where was it formulated? And it's either the church, you know, we don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
We kind of mention it, but it's for married people, and that's the extent of the conversation. Okay. Or pornography, which a lot of shame attached to that, and completely not a realistic idea of what sex is supposed to be, or culture that begins to push certain narratives and certain things in. And so you've got all of these outside influences that are forming what people's idea of a healthy sex life is supposed to look like, and they can't even really have conversations about it. And you start saying things and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just feel the air almost get sucked out of the room. And so we are trying to set couples up with and normalize these types of conversations to say, look, you talk about your kids' schedules. You talk about where your money goes. You talk about where you're going to go on vacation. You talk about whose house you're spending Christmas at this year.
Yeah.
You talk about all of these things that are a vital part of your marriage. Why would you not talk about your sex life?
Yeah.
Why would you not be willing to sit down with your spouse and have an honest conversation about what it is, and have an honest conversation about things that you would like? I mean, ladies, look, if y'all see something in the jewelry store and your husband can afford it, and you're like, baby, I saw this ring or I saw these earrings and they're so beautiful, you would make an appeal.
Yeah.
And in that appeal, he's like, if we have the finances, if it's there, if it's not going to, if I have the capacity to give, I want to give. But yet, when we sit down and we talk about our sex life and we say, hey, I would maybe like to try X. And all of a sudden it's like, I mean, you just clam up.
You see it, right?
And you do. And so, but I would relate that to the same things. And oftentimes, and one of the hot topics that we've heard some young couples talk about is that if their frequency of sex has not been up, because ladies, men need sex. You can call it sexist, misogynistic, whatever you want to call it. It's a biological fact.
Yeah.
It is a fact.
True.
And so everybody's sex drive is different. Some men's frequency is greater or less than others.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody can tell you the amount of times that you need to have sex to make it a healthy sex life. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to do that. But when your husbands have gone 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, and it's not a thought in your mind, I can promise you it's a thought in his.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I will pose the question, if he's not helping you around the house, if he's not helping you with bath time with the kids, if he's not investing in making sure that the day-to-day and helping you, you would be like, what are you doing, bud? Hello?
Yeah.
I can hear some ladies say, "Pretty."
Do you see me over here? I mean, and so you have these things, these expectations that women will place on men, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But then when the tables are turned on the sex life, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a double standard. And all I'm saying is that, ladies, be open to your husband.
Yeah.
If you're closed off, there's nothing as it's the hardest thing for a man to process when he doesn't feel accepted.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't feel normal, or he feels like he's asking too much. And so we've heard that a lot in some younger couples and some older couples, and seasons of life change and all of that. But this goes back to the thing we talked about before, is intentionality.
Yeah.
And so regardless of the season, regardless of the things that are going on within your life, making that time. And it really was a turning point for Sarah and I, and I'm just going to be vulnerable for a second because, you know, we have different sex drives, and that's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And Sarah was saying, well, how much do you need? And I say, it's not how much I need. For me, it's not the quantity, it's the quality, because that's how I feel connected to you. Mm-hmm. Women feel connected when we're spending time, when we're holding the non-sexual touch, helping around the house, investing in our kids. That's how women feel connected, by and large. I mean, making a generalization here. But it got to a point where I would look at Sarah and I would say, my tank is low. And when that clicked in her mind, and she was like, that's how he needs me to connect. Like, that's how he needs to be connected to me. It completely shifted our sex life from a number, because your husbands most of them don't need to have sex every day.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
It's about the intentionality and knowing that when we are in that moment, that we are fully present, fully there, that there's no space between us. The two become one flesh.
Yeah. And I'll say real quick too, with the my tank is empty, when he brought that to me, I was thinking, well, my tank is empty too, because I'm working, I'm taking care of the kids, like I'm doing all these things. My tank is also empty, but it's a different type of tank. We need different fuel. So
that's a great picture.
So coming to a place where we were like, okay, like this is me, this is how I feel, and I'm sorry, I know it doesn't feel good to you and you don't like it, and it's a mismatch, but this is where I'm at, and I hear you. And so, because this is a problem, we have to figure out how to make this work.
Right.
And so oftentimes that can include reprioritizing, better time management, saying no to things that you've been saying yes to, because you need to say yes to this versus all of these other things. So I did want to say that too, because I'm sure a lot of women listening can relate and say, you know what, my tank is completely empty too, because I've been taking care of the kids all day, or whatever the case is. So
But being vulnerable like that, I mean, it goes back to the vulnerability, and I think, that's just been the running theme as we've talked, is you hit on it, vulnerability, because you're being vulnerable, but now you have a conflict. There needs to be a resolution, and can we have you guys on another time, because I want to talk about that, because I do not think that couples know how to fight for each other.
Right.
Yeah. I think that they have seen fights against each other. People don't know how to have sex, but they don't know how to fight either. They don't know how to fight for their marriage. They don't, and you talked about simple things, making priorities, taking things off your plate, just reassessing life management and time management and all those things. And it takes time to do that.
It does.
I mean, it's like you need an appointment.
Yep.
I mean, you go get your hair done, ladies. I mean, I know, like, don't mess with my hair appointment,
Yep.
And if I miss it, something's wrong. So, like I'm sick or something's happened. But I say all that to say is that when you identify what the problem is and you're willing to be vulnerable with one another, you also have to be willing to walk through it.
That's right.
And it hurts so bad sometimes. And I think that's where we get lazy and we're like, we're getting along now. We're fine. That was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, really, we've been married 33 years and I can attest to that. It's like, we don't need to talk about that because, we're good now. And I think that's how things build up.
That's right.
Right.
So you guys are awesome. Look, listeners, I just want to tell you, ladies, you probably are like, I have lots of questions now. So Lauren and I can't make any promises, but if they're willing to come back another time, we would love to have them. And we'll just see, because it is, at Open Door Church that we value our marriages. Aaron says many times from many messages how much that, if your marriage is healthy, other things are healthy too, not just your family, but your friendships and other things. So hope you guys have enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been awesome.
Thank y'all so much.
And you mention there how they can, because y'all are on Instagram.
How do we connect?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. So we are on Instagram. It's The Spicy Marriage. And we also are on Apple Podcasts,
Spotify.
The Spicy Marriage. It's a little pink heart.
Yep.
So kind of easy to find. Our faces are not on there, but it's a little pink heart. So
Well, and what I wanted to say is, if you guys have questions from today, you're like, they hit on something that I would love to know more about, we would love to, equip you guys with resources. This is a resource. The podcast is a resource, but there are other things out there that can help you along the way. So you can email Pastor Lauren and myself at renew@opendoorchurch.com. Also, we have a monthly women's text that comes out, and so you'll be seeing links and updates and things. We want to be able to equip you guys to walk through life. Life is hard, and we don't want you to give up or quit, and especially on your marriage. So congratulations on 20 years.
thank you.
We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.